The Falklands War, Kim Kardashian's marriage to Chris Humphries, the lifespan of a carton of eggs when properly stored in your refrigerator. All these things have got Georges St-Pierre's tenure as UFC middleweight champion beat, at least in terms of longevity. Just a shade over a month after choking out Michael Bisping 308 MMA, 208 UFC at UFC 217 to claim the belt, St-Pierre 262 MMA, 202 UFC has vacated the 185-pound title that he never seemed too enthusiastic about defending. The official culprit may be ulcerative colitis, which St-Pierre said he was diagnosed with upon returning from his post-fight vacation, but come on. You didn't need a crystal ball to know that there was a very good chance GSP might never defend this belt, even if he was healthy enough to do so. To be fair, he never made us too many promises. Standing in the cage with the blood still damp on his skin, he stressed that he took the fight with Bisping to challenge himself. What he didn't say, right then or in the immediate aftermath, was that he couldn't wait to get back in there and unify the title with a fight against interim champ Robert Whittaker. Instead he talked all around it. He told us he didn't know what he'd do next. He promised not to freeze the division with inactivity. Even as UFC President Dana White warned that he'd be super pissed if St-Pierre didn't defend the title, GSP himself remained committed to being non-committal. That is, until this week. Shortly after St-Pierre himself admitted that he probably wouldn't fight again at 185 pounds, the UFC announced that he had vacated the title, leaving Whittaker 194 MMA, 102 UFC and former champ Luke Rockhold 163 MMA, 62 UFC to battle for the division's sole championship at UFC 221 in February. On one hand, good for St-Pierre. Suffering from an illness that might sideline him for months, he went ahead and relinquished the belt so the division could move on without him. When viewed from the right angle, it's a selfless, classy move by a legendary fighter who's often proven himself more dignified and reasonable than the company he represented during his years-long reign as UFC welterweight champ. On the other hand, if ever a case of colitis could be considered convenient, this is it. St-Pierre may have wanted to win the middleweight title, but he never seemed too enthusiastic about being the middleweight champion and shouldering all the burdens and responsibilities that come with it. He may be legitimately very sick, but it also seems to have hit him at a time when he didn't really want to go to work anyway. That's kind of perfect, at least for St-Pierre. How can White be super pissed at him now the man is sick? His health has to come first, does it not? And if he were to get his colon sorted out just in time to come back for a non-title, mega money bout against someone like Conor McGregor 213 MMA, 91 UFC some months down the line, hey, that's not a master plan in action or anything. It's just a man being tossed about by the tides of fortune, and ending up looking very, very fortunate. But what about the middleweights who've been left behind? Whittaker's interim title already seemed pretty legit based on who he had to beat to get to that point, but now he'll never even get the chance to dethrone an actual champion. The entire lineage of the title, the way Anderson Silva begat Chris Weidman, who begat Rockhold, who begat Bisping, who begat St-Pierre, has now been broken. And you can write it off as bad luck, what with the champion getting sick and all, but that excuse doesn't stand up to closer examination. If St-Pierre really wanted to wait, get healthy, then defend his title, you know the UFC brass would let him. Seriously, with all the pay-per-views he sells, of course they would. Just as the heavyweight division waited through Brock Lesnar's diverticulitis, and just as the lightweight division is still waiting out McGregor's famed spiral walkabout, so too would middleweight wait for GSP. But he doesn't want that. He never really did. Like he told us, he just wanted to challenge himself against Bisping. He also wanted to make a bunch of money and lay his hands on another UFC title just long enough to call himself a two-division champ, and he was smart enough to realize that he'd never get a better chance than this. So he offered his services and his resiliently bankable name, and the UFC did the math and then took the ride. Everybody got paid, and so nobody can get too mad. Still, it is something of a letdown, in part because of how obvious it was. Weeks before the UFC 217 bout, Rockhold shook his head with disdain and told us, come on, we didn't really believe that GSP would defend the belt if he won it, did we? Plenty of us didn't. It's at least debatable whether or not the UFC did, or if it even cared to look any further than the next payday. As for GSP, you've got to give him credit. He saw the situation for what it was, and he made it work for him. What's he supposed to do now? Be heartbroken because the same boss who trampled on him 4 years ago is super pissed at him now? Woe be unto the fighter who is not at least as selfish as the people signing his checks. Woe, also, to the fighter who lets his ego talk him into unnecessary risks. GSP's always been smarter than that, even when it got him criticized. With this historically short title reign, he reminded us that he's pretty savvy still. For more on UFC 221, check out the UFC Rumors section of the site.